Okay, let me introduce you first. And
Sure.
Eric H C CHOW, Dr. Chow has 10 years of work experience in Hong Kong higher education. Dr. Chow currently oversees the development of educational apps and mentors students on coding and app making projects at the Apps Resource Center at Hong Kong Baptist University. Dr. Chow recently received his Doctor of Education from Northeastern University in Boston, and the doctorate specifically studies the experience of liberal arts students on learning how to code. And Dr. Chow will talk about engaging students, well, scholars, students, and the public with digital humanities using mobile applications. Um, Great to have you. The floor is yours, Dr. Chow.
Great. Thank you so much, Lincoln. Okay, so I'm very happy here today to be sharing this presentation with you all. So a little bit more about myself first, because, and thank you, Lincoln, for the introduction. A little bit more about myself. I actually got my bachelor and MPhil training in engineering from Canada and Hong Kong. Okay, so that was before when I worked in higher ed. And about 10 years ago, I started working in higher education, as Lincoln has introduced. And recently, I got my Doctor of Education from Northeastern. So as you can see from my background, I'm not from history or arts or even librarianship, okay? But hopefully, this presentation today will give you kind of a new and fresh perspective to DH, okay, which is a topic that I recently become very interested and engaged in. Okay, so what is my current work at the Apps Resource Center at Hong Kong Baptist U? So I'm working as the manager at the ARC, Apps Resource Center, since around 2016. So the ARC has two objectives. So the first is to design and build educational mobile apps for publicly funded universities in Hong Kong. And the second is to engage and mentor students to develop coding and design skills. Okay, so we have all sorts of requests for mobile apps from faculty members. Okay, so as you can see on the screen, this is like some of the screenshots of the apps that we've done. Now they're discipline specific. Okay, so we don't build like generic like learning management system apps. We actually build discipline specific apps. For example, economics, Chinese medicine, music, chemistry, visual arts. So all sorts of different disciplines. Not only that, we also build apps that are course specific. So when the faculty member approach us, they actually have a course, in mind that they have some pedagogical issues that they think they will be able to resolve using apps or address using apps. And so if we choose one app now, we can actually pinpoint one particular course at HKBU that uses that app as part of the courseware. Now, not only that, all our apps are also free. Okay, so free of charge, meaning all our students can download and everyone around the world who are interested in these topics can download. And also our development, we don't charge anything because we're actually funded by the UGC, the Hong Kong government. Now I want to show one specific app that are specifically for a student in visual arts to give you a taste of what we do. So this is the app that I want to talk about. So recently we have received a request from the Academy of Visual Art from Professor Daniel Lau, who specializes in studying Chinese calligraphy styles. So this app is called 遊走香城上墨寶. So literally it means walking around in Hong Kong and appreciating the Chinese calligraphy, okay? So basically the app showcases a collection of Chinese calligraphy that appears in the urban space of Hong Kong. And is actually intended to be kind of like a pocket guide, okay, for Dr. Lau's student to visit and look at this calligraphy on the self-guided field trips that is part of his course. So let me really quickly show you a demo, okay? Can you see like a mobile app looking screen right now? Okay. So do you guys see the app?
We see a range of apps. We see
okay,
many.
range of apps. Right. Okay. So that's the correct screen. Okay. So now I'm going to open up. So that's the app. So you can see the splash screen comes up. Okay. So this is the app that I'm talking about. So basically, it's pretty simple. So in Dr. Lau's course, there are 5 themes that he goes through. Okay, so on the left-hand side, you can see them here. And then you can actually also scroll through the different themes and look at the related buildings in Hong Kong that are under those themes. Okay, so for example, I go to the one about religion. Okay, and then I can go to, let's say, Wong Tai Sin Temple. That's actually quite close to Hong Kong Baptist U. So I click on that, and then it shows the photo gallery. Basically, these are all photos taken by Dr. Lau, documenting the different calligraphy that he found at that location. Okay, and let's say, for example, if I go to the entrance, I can take a look at this, and it actually shows, okay, what is this? What is written on there? The Chinese characters, what kind of calligraphy style is used? What is it writing about? What the content? Because sometimes some of the calligraphy actually uses like cursive script, and sometimes it's difficult to read. So it is difficult for normal people to decode. And so they actually write the content, what is written on there. Okay. So as you can see, this is kind of like a pocket guide. When you go to that location, you take out the app, you open up that photo, and you can kind of like learn in context what is going on at that location in that particular spot with respect to those calligraphy. Okay. Now, not only a photo gallery is available, also you can look at the bottom of the screen. There's a map function where it shows basically the location of all these calligraphy kind of sites that is available in Hong Kong that you can go to or documented by Dr. Lau. So for example, the purple spot is actually where I am right now at Hong Kong Baptist U. So using the phone's GPS, it detects that I'm in here. And let's say I want to go to visit, okay, so around me, there's 2, locations. On the top here, that's actually the Wong Tai Sin Temple. Okay, so not only I can access that photo gallery from here, okay, and just scroll through it. So I can actually look at it before I even go to that spot. I can also do some route planning. So it can actually show me if I'm there, then how can I go to that spot? Okay, so pretty handy and convenient app as kind of part of the courseware for the students. Okay, so that's what I want to show you for the app. Let me go back to my slides. Oh, sorry. Just go to the right. Okay, so obviously this is sort of like archiving project, right? And it has a map interface showing point of interest at different geographic locations with images and text that goes alongside with it to let users learn about its like point of interest in context. And of course, this project has a high resemblance to a typical DH project. Okay, from the kind of like the motivation to the design to the development. Okay, so as you can imagine, in the back there's a lot of photos to be processed and also a lot of text that Dr. Lau has documented that needs to get imported into the app interface. And this experience of developing the app has really got me started into diving deeper into the world of DH. Because remember, I'm actually from engineering and education, so I actually don't know much about DH, right? But this app really has got me, started into, learning more about DH. So with the recent COVID pandemic, I actually have a chance to attend many webinars and seminars and presentations around the world on Zoom talking about, DH projects. And from these presentations, I've actually learned that DH projects, first of all, comes in all shapes and forms, obviously. But my observation is that among them, okay, all these presentations and all these DH projects, there are 3 main target audience groups, as shown in this blue triangle here, okay, that are really common to all of them. And those would be students, public, and scholars, okay? Now, this may look obvious, okay, if you take 5 seconds to think about it, but I actually have never really seen this addressed deliberately in presentations I've attended. But I still think this is important to keep in mind, especially for people of scholars who are developing DH projects. Because if we think about it, no matter whether we are creating websites or mobile apps, we are really designing and creating digital deliverables or digital products, right? And in the recent 10 years or so, the term user experience design or UX design often goes hand in hand with any digital product development process. And that's because ultimately we want to create a good and positive user experience for the users of our apps or websites. And to do that, we really need to understand the needs of our user. So what are the needs of these three user groups that I observe? Okay, so and they are actually very different. So if you look at the triangle here, you can see students. Well, oftentimes they wanted to use DH projects or DH works to fulfill or enhance learning in existing coursework. Okay, much like the app that you saw, you know, that's part of their coursework to go to the field trips, right? Or the public, okay, basically is to raise curiosity and awareness, or from the perspective of the public is to satisfy their own curiosity on a particular topic, right? And for scholars, obviously, is to conduct academic research. And of course, there are a lot of DH project that I saw. Basically, it provides a new way to visualize data such that scholars can ask new research questions that they may not have asked before or think about before. Okay. Now, to design, you know, DH projects specific for these users, kind of from a user experience perspective, we need to think about things like contents, tone of voice of how you write contents in your DH projects, right? Instructions or introductions. Do the users need any guidance or help in reading those contents? Are there any special jargons or terms that that's there that, you know, public may not understand? Should the tone be layman or academic or professional sounding? These are all, you know, you need to think about who the users are. Or data visualization and user interface design, okay? So the public may expect something that is easy to use without going through a lot of tutorials, okay? So I've attended many DH seminars where, webinars, where basically the whole 1 hour is talking about how to use this particular DH platform to perform, you know, to look at data in a certain way. Now the public may not have this kind of time to go through that, you know, kind of tutorial. So the design would have to be adjusted or cater for the public. That is different from, you know, if you're doing this for scholars. Okay, so perhaps, you know, consider adding things like tooltips on the screens so that they can the public can, you know, easily access certain functions without going through such a tutorial. Or, you know, from a user experience design perspective, the platform of choice. Okay, should it be mobile or should it be on the web, right? Now, of course, the mobile app as a platform for DH project offers advantages like convenience or provide access anytime, anywhere on your fingertips. Okay. Now, if we think back to the Chinese calligraphy app, who do you think our target audience is from that blue triangle diagram we've previously shown? Any guesses? Like from the chat box? I think I've mentioned one group already, students, right? And I think I've also mentioned public, right? So students and public. So now the use of mobile actually makes sense here, right? Because both the public and the students would expect to easily take out a mobile phone and learn about Chinese calligraphy artwork at the location, okay? Also, the user interface should be intuitive for these two user groups. So not only, as I show on my demo, that the app contained a photo gallery that is like very typical for a mobile app, and, you know, anyone who's used a mobile app before would know how to use a photo gallery. But also the menu has to be intuitive. Okay, so the design of this menu is actually well thought out. Now, as I mentioned, it's actually theme based, right? So all the photos, all the point of interest are actually sorted according by themes. Now, those themes might be specific to Dr. Lau's course at HKBU. But it should also be usable and easy to browse for anyone without deep knowledge in a topic, for example, the public, right? So to achieve this, our app designer actually looked at some common learning apps with really good UI design for browsing large amount of theme-based contents, and we try to model from it. So for example, our main menu is actually modeled based on the Masterclass app, okay, a pretty popular learning app in the States that categorizes themes and lessons offered by famous celebrities. So you can see on the right-hand side of the screen here. Okay, so the resemblance of how we model the app interface based on that. So my point here is that when we are designing DH projects for the public, we should use familiar user interface design for a positive user experience. And this does not only apply to mobile apps. One can actually also look around for the most updated trends in web user interface design and model after that as well. Okay. So the next DH project I want to share with you is also on mobile, okay? But this one is addressing different audience group. is actually the public and scholars. And it's actually from a different country, okay? So it's actually the product of Dr. Hashimoto Yuta, a scholar from the National Museum of Japanese History. The DH project is about Kujushiji learning. So Kujushiji is the classical Japanese cursive script widely used before the 19th century. Now, after 1900, Japanese people decided to standardize their Japanese into the writing system into a simpler hiragana system. And since then, a lot of people are forgetting how to read and write the Kujushiji. But the problem today is that many historical documents are still written in the Japanese cursive script because it was used for such a long time in Japanese history, which makes it difficult for people living in the present to read and transcribe these documents, including even some Japanese scholars, because simply they weren't exposed to these scripts like in their training. But in recent years, there has been a resurging interest among Japanese in learning this, picking up this like Kujushiji again, feeling that this is actually an important part of their cultural heritage, okay? So Dr. Yuta actually decided to create this wonderful DH project, which has two components. The first component is the mobile app Kula, which is the, from the previous screen as you saw. Basically, it just shows, for example, a lot of these like cursive Japanese script writing actually resembles to which symbol in the current hiragana system, and that would be ki here. Okay, so it has like a lot of these like different small snippet of like a learning, showing you a lot of images and showing you what is the current hiragana system symbol. So that's the app Kula. Okay, and it provides basically accessible resources for training and reading Kujushiji. It's free for public to download. Okay, and just public as well as scholar can also download to use. Now, again, it makes sense to make this into a mobile device platform because it helps address the need for the public. Ease of use, okay, enabling busy everyday learners to pick out the app every day on the bus when they're commuting, just to open up and learn about Kujushiji. And of course, scholars can also use this as a quick reference for Kujushiji as well. Now, the more interesting, I think, component of this project is the second component, called, it's actually a website called Minade Hongoku, started since around 2017. It's an open online platform that has images of many old Japanese woodblock prints and historical documents, many of which are written in Kujushiji. And the platform actually allows everyone, okay, including both scholars and the public, to help transcribe these images. So let me really quickly show you the user interface. So you can see here on the right is the image of the woodblock, okay? And on the left is a blank space for a user to log in and start transcribing. Now, if you see, actually, there are some yellow spaces here. They are actually blanks, okay? So people, as I said, Japanese people, some of them are starting to forget, how to transcribe them. So they can actually leave some of them blank if they don't know what those characters are. Now, after this, they can submit this transcription to the system with the blanks, and they can post it up into kind of like a social networking site, okay, a timeline where someone, says, oh, I've transcribed, 318 characters from this particular woodblock, okay? And on this top here, you can see this little icon says, the direct translation should be something like help needed, okay? So help needed to basically complete that transcription. So user can actually kind of like look around and say, oh, I'm interested in this. I click into that and then start filling in the holes. So you can see that you can do all kinds of like collaborations, right? You can actually have multiple people transcribing the same documents together, right? Now, of course, once someone helped you with the transcription, you will get a notification from your app or from the platform saying, oh, someone has helped you with the transcription. And you can actually go back and take a look which characters have been filled in by the other guys from the same platform, right? So in effect, it's really kind of like a social networking site for Kujushiji transcription. And this is kind of design that also caters, I think, users' needs. And the users are usually more willing to interact with a digital product when there's social element built into it. And I think this is like done really smartly. In fact, in education theory, there's something called social learning theory, where scholars find that a lot of learning effectively happens when we interact and learn from our other people or from our peers, or hence social learning. So according to the project creator, Dr. Yuta, around 2.8 million characters has been transcribed in merely 8 months from this social network site, which I believe would not have been possible if there's no social element added to this DH project. So I think it's a really good and amazing project. Okay, so now I move our attention from Japan back to Hong Kong, okay, to a DH project which is more relevant to today's conference theme, Chinese statification. Okay, so just like the Kujishiji project is about transcribing classical texts, but this one is for the Chinese language, and it takes it one step further, not just transcribing it by a human, but using machine learning in a competitive format. And that is the 2021 Chinese Classical Text OCR Challenge organized by CUHK. Okay, so this event was actually open for students and scholars to participate. It was like stated on their website, as well as researchers from the IT industry. So let me just really quickly open up the website to show you their effort. Okay, so you can see from the timeline, this competition actually happened just a couple of months ago. Okay, so it finished in April. Okay, with participants actually grouping in teams, and essentially each teams use their own AI algorithm to try to recognize a given set of Chinese classical texts each day for 10 days in a row, and the team with the highest accuracy wins the contest. So let me just really quickly show you the result page. So this is basically the result of the competition. Okay, as we can see, the winners were Academia Sinica, South China University of Technology from Guangzhou, and also Deep Blue AI, which is an AI research company from Beijing. Now, I think this is a very, very meaningful project again, and it has some really good work coming from CUHK Library. It's meaningful in that it really encouraged I think in enhancing existing research in OCR and machine learning, and it's also facilitate exchange between students, scholars, and practitioners through this kind of competitive format. So I think it's really good, really great. Okay. All right, so let me just minimize my website and go back to my slides. Okay, so now the reason why I kind of discussed about this OCR challenge is that for my final part of presentation, I would like to take a little diversion from mobile apps and DH and talk a little bit more about pedagogy and students, which is a group of people that I care a lot about. In recent years, we are seeing more and more academic programs in Hong Kong that are introducing digital literacy into non-technical or non-computing curriculum. So for example, many of you may know we're introducing GIS in geography, machine learning in finance to predict stock prices, for example, and obviously digital humanities for arts and humanities. So the question I always ask myself is, how can we be more inclusive for students from arts and humanities so that they can also perform well in this kind of big global trend? Now, I think Professor Mahoney's presentation this morning also mentioned about the importance of strengthening digital literacy among students. Okay, so and also from the list of winners of the CUHK OCR competition, if you remember, 2 out of 3 of them were actually technical or computer science institutions. Now, wouldn't it be really cool if we have this contest later a few years down the line, and if the winning team is actually from the Faculty of Arts of a local Hong Kong institution, right? Wouldn't it be really cool, right? So how can we get arts and humanities students to be more involved in DH? Aside from the CUHK competition, what if these students could work on DH in their final year projects using, let's say, historical archives with openly accessible API? Or even creating their own kind of little small archive using data scraping, for example. So in order to do that, they actually need basic coding skills. Now, that's what we are trying to do here at HKBU. In fact, if you recall from the beginning of my presentation, one of the objectives of our Apps Resource Center is to organize and conduct educational activities for students to develop coding skills. So at the bottom here, you can see a picture of me, or pictures of me teaching various coding and app making workshops, both online and face-to-face at HKBU. So obviously, some students from arts and humanities are already jumping onto this bandwagon and starting to learn programming. And this is exactly the topic of my recent study, which actually is my dissertation from my Doctor of Education degree. in which I look at the experience of non-computer science or non-CS students who attended introductory coding courses offered by HKBU CS, okay, computer science department, okay, because the first some of the first year computer science coding courses actually open for all, okay, so some of the arts and humanities students think, well, programming is getting becoming more important, let's try to take a course in it. So I interviewed these students, and a handful of these students actually tell me directly that when they attend these classes, they all felt a sense of intimidation when they're put into the same learning environment as the CS students. They also find that there's lack of discipline-specific learning. So meaning, all the projects or the assignments actually just relevant to, computer science students. They can't really relate these back to their own discipline of study, okay, from arts and humanities. Okay, so what I propose is that we can design and host discipline-specific coding workshops for these arts and humanities students. So for example, 2 years ago, before the pandemic, okay, when we still have like face-to-face teaching, I actually designed and host a 3-hour Python workshop for journalism students at HKBU. So the workshop was split into 2 parts. First was programming basics, so variables, things like teaching them what variables are, basic programming logics, if then else statement, case statements, etc. And also the use of web scraping API, okay, called Beautiful Soup. If any of you have used that before, it's actually very popular in Python programming language. And then the second part is basically to apply what I learned in the first part to scrape the BBC News website for analyzing the recent 100 news headline that they scraped from the website, and they can actually export this to like a CSV file and maybe do some word counting on in Excel, for example. So this is basically the workshop, and let me show you some photos. So as you can see, it's a very hands-on workshop. So it's conducted in a computer lab, and it's each student just basically line by line the code I type on the screen, and they type together with me. Now, although it's an optional workshop, actually it was full house, okay, with 50 journalism students attending it. And as I've observed, almost all of them were really engaged and trying their best to do the coding exercises together with me. Now, imagine that after this kind of coding workshop, okay, so students may find it so interesting and develop enough confidence in programming that they wanted to take it further and perhaps perform data scraping from websites of different languages and analyze headlines from newspapers from different countries, right? In fact, this is exactly what 2 of the students who attended this workshop approached me and trying to get help on that afterward, right? So they actually came to me and say, I want to do that, how can I do that? And I what I learned here, is a tip of an iceberg, but what if I want to take it one step further? So students can be very creative. Once they understand the value of programming, they could come up with like really wonderful and interesting applications and projects that is really relevant to their own studies, okay? And that's really the point of this workshop. It's not to train them to be, super computer programmer, but just to get them interested and have the confidence so that, they can think about how can I relate programming back to my own discipline of study. And imagine again, if we run more of these kind of coding workshops for more students for arts and humanities, who knows if even only 5% of them want to apply programming in their first final year project, right? Or even develop interest in the possibility of studying DH for their masters, or even create some sort of like word count analysis similar to the one described by Dr. Wendy Wong in the last presentation, but on historical newspaper archives that are openly available outside CUHK, let's say, okay? I think that would be really wonderful. Now, I think my time is almost up, so let me briefly conclude my seemingly incoherent presentation in which I talked a lot of things about, different things about mobile apps, DH, user experience, and computer programming. I think there are kind of like 3 main takeaways from my presentation, okay? So if you're in the role of managing or creating DH projects, okay, so the first point is consider who the users of your DH projects are, because this should dictate how your DH project is designed and implemented. Things like, tone of voice, use of words, user interface design, or platform usage, whether it's mobile or web. Okay. The second takeaway would be, when appropriate, okay, use mobile apps to better engage users, especially when the users are students and the public, okay? Even if your project is just a web-based project, you can actually program it in such a way so that it's mobile friendly, so that, you know, people can actually access it on mobile phone easily without, you know, zooming in, you know, to just tiny, small little text all the time. So look into that because that's possible. And finally, I strongly believe that we can better engage students in DH, especially from arts and humanities, by promoting basic coding education, just what I've shown in my presentation. So if you're inspired by this part of my talk, when about, you know, computer programming for students for arts and humanities, when you go back to your own institution today, think about working with your own CS departments or colleagues who have programming knowledge to design or tailor some basic coding workshop as an extracurricular activity for your own students, where they can relate it to their own kind of discipline of study. I think that would be a really good start. Okay, so that's it from me. I think I've used up my time, so I will now hand the floor back to you guys and back to Lincoln, and I'll take any questions or comments that you may have on my presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. And yes, do keep the questions coming in the chat box, or do raise your hand in the Zoom chat room. Thank you,
Yep, no problem.
Eric, for this very important presentation. It is not incoherent, but it is, you know, actually a much needed reminder to pay more careful attention to the receiving end of DH projects and DH research. So let's keep an eye on the chat box and see what questions there are from the audience.
Sure.
And while everyone's typing, let me, okay, well, I guess let's give the time to Simon first,
Okay.
who's, yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Go ahead, Simon.
Yeah, great points you made there. And I'm just wondering if you watched the webinar that I recorded for some friends earlier on this week. I don't think it's been screened yet, but your arguments about user experience were exactly the same ones that I was making.
Okay.
But my audience were completely different. It was for a friend, and the webinar was a business-to-business one.
Mm-hmm.
But I entirely agree. I teach, well, I was teaching on a master's degree program, and for part of the creation of electronic products, the user experience design element is so important, and actually putting the user at the center, so you used to call it user-centered design. And also your comments about the programming, again, in the master's program, most of my students were from a solid humanities background, but they were very, very enthusiastic about the technical aspects, the programming classes that we used to do. And I tell you for why, because that's what used to get them jobs, and they knew that. Yes. So how we can pull in undergraduates, very laudable, and you know, well done trying to do that.
Yeah.
Because the sooner they have some engagement and they get the idea of the possibilities, the more enthusiastic they become, and they'll roll that over to graduate degrees. But I exactly take your point, because we had this problem in our in my program, and that is making the examples that we were using, the assignments they had, relevant to their type of material. And in my first year, we actually ran one of the courses in conjunction with computer science, and for exactly the reasons you mentioned, didn't work. So we brought it in-house for following years, and we worked very hard in subsequent years to actually make the material that we're using and the examples that we were using relevant for the students, because that's what gives them the hook. You know, without that hook, they switch off.
Yes.
So yes. Very, very well done. And please do shout very, very loudly at all these types of events for user experience design, for user-centered design, and particularly for getting the students involved in coding. And I think all my PhD students make use of coding in some form or another. And many of the master's projects, it's exactly what they want to do. They want to show off the skills that they've developed. And they want to, as you said, they want to explore new territory. You know, they want to find out how to do new things. And, you know, the web scraping and use of APIs were very popular. That's become a little less popular, I think, in the UK these days. But things like Python programming can't squeeze enough into a master's program.
Yeah, sometimes I guess if like I said in my presentation, perhaps consider something like an extracurricular activities, so that it's like kind of outside the program. And you know, as I said, students are very creative, and once they learn the tool, they can probably think about, oh, how can I actually apply it in my regular, you know, curriculum learning, and make some cool projects with that. I think that might be even like one way to kind of like get them more interested. And of course, you know, tailoring those workshops to that discipline of study would be, you know, even, you know, would be best. Yeah.
Is that being able to see the application is so important. One of my first jobs when I was working at King's, it was actually doing computing skills for PhD students and staff, right? Not for undergraduates or master's students.
Right.
And we used to get to the point where we got onto databases, and half the class would leave, wouldn't come back after that. But the ones that did come back, they were the ones that I could actually see the application and the benefit of using simple database in their PhD research or in their own research as an academic staff. So again, it's finding this hook. And if you can get them when they're undergraduates, you can build it up over 3 or 4 years. You know? Unfortunately, the UK master's programs are just the 1 year, so we have very
right. I understand.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to stop now. Because I'm
Okay. Well, I mean, and also just one follow up on a comment, because you also talk about finding a job, right? You know, having programming skills. That's a really, nowadays we also see that here in Hong Kong, where you know, if you have certain programming skills, then you know you put it on your resume, not like you 100% get a job, but it will be make you more competitive. And I think one thing that I will also kind of like tell students about this, why do you learn programming, is again, not to become like a really good programmer and kind of replace the programmer when you go out to do your first job, but really because now there's so much interdisciplinary work going on in the work in the job field, that you need to be able to communicate with, you know, programmers who are, you know, sometimes maybe pretty nerdy and don't really know how to talk. You know, you need to be proactively talking to them, and so what's the best way to do that other than, you know, if you learn programming yourself, then you have that common language and say, I know this for loop is actually not working. Can we try to figure it out together? That already makes that bond, and, you know, make it so much easier for students from arts and humanities to work together with, you know, computer science students. So it's really building that common vocabulary. Yeah, I think it's important.
One of my seminars on this back in London, because this is the whole selling point for a DH master graduate program, is that it does allow you to speak both languages in there as well.
Right.
And it is the technical skills. I think that this is the feedback I get from employers and my students that actually makes a difference on a resume. But coming back to the programming, coming back to databases, it teaches them. When I did used to teach undergraduate students, I used to say to them that this benefits all areas you'll study. And they used to look at me and go, huh? I said, it teaches you logic, and it teaches you structure, and it teaches you how to structure an argument, right? And this will spin off into essay writing. You know, they used to look at me like I'm an idiot, but it's true. You know that's true. I know that's true. Anybody that does this knows that it's true, right? It is even simple databases. It teaches you structure, logic as well.
Right. Thank you for your comment, Professor Mahoney. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Let's get other questions from the audience or our other speakers. Anyone? Or else I'll seize this chance myself.
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
One constraint that many DH projects have is of longer-term resources, especially of manpower or the resources to hire, right? To hire an apps developer or an UX team. So apart from, of course, going to experts like yourself or your colleagues in the apps resource center, what advice would you have for DH project teams who find themselves resource strapped, but would want to develop public-facing apps and not only those facing scholars or sort of the expert community?
Right. Okay. Well, there are, for example, like I briefly mentioned in my presentation, like even it does not. So even a website can actually be programmed in such a way so that it's user-friendly on a mobile phone. So those are called responsive programming, so responsive design. So meaning that the website actually is responsive to adjust the size so that when you view it on your website or on a desktop, it will look, large and wide. But if you look at it on a mobile phone, things will kind of like zoom to an appropriate level so that, you can view it properly. So I think the key point here is to know the word, responsive design. And then you go to Google and try to find, actually, there are many templates that are already created that are responsive. So you can actually download those, maybe, okay, some of them are free, but the higher quality ones, they are maybe about, 20, 30 US dollars, which is quite cheap. So I think anyone who knows a little bit of HTML programming can actually download those templates and
adapt them to
your own project. And the question would be then, okay, so how can I get something like a network graph, for example, to put it into those templates so that it will be in a responsive template, so that no matter whether the user is viewing on desktop or on a phone, it will still be rather user friendly. So I think that will be the first kind of like avenue that I will look at, because usually a lot of times, it's difficult to hire like an in-house mobile apps developer. But then a lot of times there are web developer available in different departments for creating or managing their websites of the department. So that I think would be if you ask those programmers to actually get like a template and then just like add things in there, it's actually not that difficult. So I would. That would be the first thing that pops up to my mind about this. Yeah. But you're right. If you really want to look at like developing a full-blown mobile apps in Hong Kong, if you outsource it to external like vendors, or first of all, just the whole outsourcing process is like is pretty hellish.
Yes.
In all the administration, all the red tapes I have to go.
The red tape, yes.
Yeah, exactly. And because it's such a new thing, right? And the finance office may not know. Okay, so how do I quote this, and is this quote reasonable, and things like that. But even that aside, in Hong Kong, I find that a lot of mobile apps developer that are working, they really don't tailor it's really difficult for them to just put a team just to tailor one app for you that is like specialized for teaching and learning, and they often just use some template, also just like basically use some template apps that they have built before, and those could be e-commerce app, which is applicable to
entirely different,
but they try to maybe just tweak them in a way so that it kind of work for you, and then it's charged you like super expensive amount of like fee. So if those companies are using templates apps also, then why don't we try to look for templates ourselves, and then in-house try to do that. And there are lots of resources online now. It's just a matter of, I think, just knowing the keywords to find them, and responsive templates would be your first one, I think.
Right. Thank you. And this situation, I think, is making your point about students learning to code more, all the more pertinent now, because the possibility of working with students who might have these skills or might have attended the kinds of training that you took charge of, they would be the kinds of people that DH project teams could possibly work with on these things, rather than outsourcing them to
sure. And I see in the chat box also, Professor Mahoney just said, check out your CS department and see if they have modules on app development. You can also set it as their coursework project. Again, really good idea. This kind of thing can be done in-house as well, through kind of like a student learning experience, maybe collaboratively with your CS department. So that could be one possibility as well. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Any other questions from anyone else? If not, time is almost up. So let us thank Dr. Eric Chow for this great presentation. And this concludes our presentations, and we'll be taking a short break right now. We'll be taking a 15-minute break before our final workshop session by Dr. Shipei Chen. So I'll see you in a while. Stay tuned and look at the workshop program at this webpage. If you haven't checked the LoGuard website, you could use this time to sign up for a LoGuard Tools account. And I'm now pasting the website onto the chat box. So I'll see you again at 5:30 p.m. Hong Kong time.